Okay. You're good.
Okay, we're live again and we're back on and we're going to talk about carbon reduction. Is that correct?
Carbon reduction strategy, and I'll go through the resilience
there we
improvement
go.
plan also.
Okay.
Is that on the same slide? Is there a same set of slides or did we get a different?
No, there's a
Different
different.
set.
Okay, no problem. I didn't see it on the.
Well, yeah, I wondered about that.
We didn't make the webpage, must be.
Did you get these to me? Because your other slides were on.
I'm gonna go get my brace, my arm.
I did give them, it was quite late last night, but yes, I did.
Are you not seeing them online?
That's not on the
Only the
webpage.
first one, so the first one.
Oh,
I'm gonna fix
So
that
there
right
should
now.
be two under Andrew's name.
I'll fix it right now. Do you have our copy in front of you?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, I'll fix it right now. Sorry about that.
All good. That's the worst thing that happens to us today. We've had a wonderful day.
sounds good. Should I wait for Senator Kitchell or just?
Yeah. Okay, we can begin.
Okay, well, great. Again, my name is Andrew Wright and I'm the Environmental Policy Manager at V-Trans, and I just wanted to take a couple minutes to explain a little bit about the group that I'm leading. It's a new group in policy planning and intermodal development division called the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Program. And we are involved in all things at the nexus of transportation and environment. So we're looking at water quality from a policy perspective, water quality, soils contamination, road ecology, all the things.
Running up the door? Is that on your list?
Manufactured topsoil. That's on
That's
there.
what made the news in terms of spreading.
Yeah, could be, who knows?
And how long
I
have you
heard very
been?
much about that. I have been with the agency for 23 years. I've been in this position for 2 years. So now we have a team of 5 people. Before me was Dan Dutcher, and before him was Gina Campoli. So I'm sure you've heard much from them. They were one person trying to do all these things. And then with the increase in federal funding around climate mitigation and adaptation, we're really focusing on that right now. We've got the Climate Action Plan, the Comprehensive Energy Plan, State Hazard Mitigation Plan, all that have obligations and responsibilities for the agency. And so we're really focusing on climate mitigation and adaptation. We've got a staff of 5. You've all heard a lot from Patrick Murphy over the last couple of years. So he is overseeing a couple of staff that are helping him with vehicle electrification efforts. And then we have one other staff that is focusing primarily right now on resilience and adaptation. So first, we're going to go over the carbon reduction strategy. And this really is in response to the T-bill last year, Section 31, that called for specific actions to be carried out while we develop the carbon reduction strategy and also the resilience improvement plan. And so that's what I'm reporting on here today. Carbon reduction strategy.
Was there a federal reason that we did it too? It wasn't just because of this document.
That we did the carbon reduction strategy?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yep, yes. So you're familiar with the IIJA, the carbon reduction program. We will receive $32 million over the life of that. So that's state fiscal year 22 to 26. This list shows the different types of projects and programs that the guidance allows for. So we're looking at really reducing traffic congestion, reducing reducing single occupancy vehicle trips, looking at fleet electrification and the related infrastructure to that. Just really any project or program that works to achieve reduced carbon emissions.
I'll tell you one thing, the trucking industry has made a lot of progress. I can tell you that. I have a ton of trucks delivering my place every week. And what a difference. I mean, the new trucks are really focusing. You don't see the black smoke, you don't see the smell, and they're doing a great job. The trucking industry is making a lot of progress. I know automobiles are too, but trucks have come a long way in the last couple of years.
Yeah. And even with the passenger fleet trucks,
yeah,
we're seeing more in electrification and
it's
different alternative
amazing.
fuels
It's
too.
amazing. I can't believe the difference I've noticed in my small.
That's why
Future is here.
transportation emissions are now second to thermal is now number
Isn't
1.
that exciting?
So
we're
what am I thinking?
neck and neck still. Definitely transportation contributes.
Oh, and it's still very significant for this industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did the IIJ require that you have a strategy?
Yes, yep. So it required a strategy. Different programs had different requirements. It needed to be provided to the Federal Highway Administration in mid-November, and so we got that in.
Did they have to accept it, or you just had to send it
They do have to approve it, and we have not heard back from them yet. So those types
So
of,
did the plan that you had to submit articulate how you would spend the 6.3 million over the 5 years?
which sure does, and I'll get into all of that. Yep.
And so one might think, does the plan have to be approved in order to release the money?
No, so like I said, the IIJA programs all have different requirements and eligibilities and ways that you can spend the money. A plan was required, but we could access the funds before the plan was approved for this program. But in every program, we couldn't.
So that money helped pay for this report?
Yes.
And how much did we pay for this?
For the report, oh gosh, what is the, I want to say the contract was 300,000, I can't remember. Don't quote me on that at all.
You could have done it for less, Andy.
Really strategy.
So you had a whole public engagement process, which I
Yep. Yeah, we'll get into all of that. And one of the important things to note, these are sort of the levers that V-Trans has direct control over, but in the guidance, it was stated that the carbon reduction strategy shall support the reductions of the transportation emissions of the state. And because we have the requirements of the Global Warming Solutions Act, we really use this opportunity in the development of our carbon reduction strategy to look beyond what we could do with our agency projects and programs, and to look at what other policies could be implemented, whether that be policies, regulations, incentives that could be implemented to help achieve those reductions.
And does it include anything about the thermal uses of energy that the agency has, or is it just really all about transportation?
It's just about transportation. Yeah. So just quickly to ground everything, to ground everyone in this work was conducted with two primary objectives. The first was to support the requirements for greenhouse gas emissions reductions as laid out in the Global Warming Solutions Act, including the sectoral proportionality that was recommended by the Vermont Climate Council. So transportation is 40% of the issue and needs to contribute 40% of the solution. The second was to support the federal requirement under the carbon reduction program to develop the carbon reduction strategy that would describe how most cost effectively to implement the carbon reduction program funds. And so the approach that we took for this work involved two phases. The first was to develop a methodology for evaluating the effect of the agency's capital program on greenhouse gas emissions. And then the second, again, was to develop that strategy. So the development of the strategy was conducted under the guidance of both an advisory committee and a technical committee, ensuring we had an understanding of what data already existed, and that was Vermont specific. And we wanted to assure that we were aligning the work with other agencies' plans and statewide plans. We held 2 rounds of stakeholder engagement meetings and 2 virtual public meetings with 2 sessions for each of those public meetings. We had a webpage with a place to provide comments. We received just under 70 comments. We had an online survey also and had over 700 respondents to that. So we were really pleased to see all the input there. We also provided an overview.
Was participation in the survey promoted by advocacy groups?
Yeah.
Or how many Vermonters, decided they wanted to complete the survey as opposed to, I'm a member of
Yeah, well, we had outreach.
A blast went out. I mean, we get emails all the time that are generated by those kind of communications to organization members. So I was just wondering if the survey might have
We
been.
definitely saw advertisements through like Local Motion and different organizations for our public meetings. And in our public meetings, we advertised that we had the website and the survey up. I don't know how much more other organizations did.
So this is Rob Kidd with the Vermont Sierra Club. Yeah, we sent it out to our membership, and I know the different coalitions I was involved with had sent it out to our list of members. And when I did participate on a lot of calls, I saw a cross section of our memberships who did join them. And I'm going to give the agency credit; they did a great job of doing public engagement on this process. So.
Who was the contract?
It was Cambridge Systematics, and they are extremely well versed in this. They've written federal guidance documents on how to incorporate greenhouse gases into DOT's processes, and have a really strong technical team that conducts the analyses. And then we also provided updates to the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee of the Vermont Climate Council on several different occasions to keep them in the loop of where we're going. So this was our timeline. It has both tasks laid out. It also shows the touch points that we had with the technical and the advisory committees. It shows the public outreach and the stakeholder meetings. Again, the ultimate requirement was to submit the strategy to Federal Highway Headquarters by mid-November.
So does this have the key components of that strategy?
Mm-hmm.
I just haven't gotten to that page.
Maybe.
Because I haven't.
It's coming. It's coming. This is really pretty much the key components, because it really was steeped in a technical analysis to understand where we were, what our baseline is, what the capital program could do for impacting greenhouse gas emissions, and then understanding the gap between that, so the baseline plus our programs compared to the requirements of the Global Warming Solutions Act, what that gap was, and then developing and evaluating, again, the effectiveness of different strategies to close that gap. So the first step in the process was to understand our starting point. So using data and assumptions about vehicle miles traveled, vehicle fuel efficiency, rates of ZEV, zero emission vehicle adoption, the team developed this baseline forecast. And the baseline estimated about 2.9 million metric tons of CO2 were emitted by Vermont's transportation sector in 2022. So that's sort of our starting point. And then we projected that this would decline to 2.4 million metric tons in 2030 and under 800,000 metric tons in 2050. And really the key takeaway from this slide is that the vast majority of the transportation emissions are from motor vehicles, so the cars and trucks. And the decline that we see in the on-road vehicles line, that first line there, is due to the transition to zero emission vehicles. And this is really in large part the modeling took into consideration recently adopted rules in the state, the Advanced Clean Cars 2 and Advanced Clean Trucks rules. And that really does accelerate. It really is, electrification is really going to be where we see the most gains. And then we'll really recognize the full potential of these rules through a lot of the programs that the agency oversees. So the incentive programs and the charging infrastructure that we're trying to roll out in partnership with
gasoline engine cars. What the manufacturer is going to do that? They gotta cut the carbon, right? And it's something that's
and these rules have requirements for certain target years and an increasing amount of vehicles that need to be delivered.
Is that general of all the vehicles that are manufactured, or every manufacturer does something different?
Every manufacturer is required. You could hear a lot more from AMR on this and the details, but generally the manufacturers are required to deliver a certain percent of the vehicles that they deliver here have to be zero emission vehicles, and that increases over time. So starting with model year 26, I believe. So
is that more towards electric vehicles or hybrids or
it's both, and it's and they can earn credits by doing a variety of different mitigation measures. So it's a complex system of what they need to deliver and how
trucks fall in the same category as that, or is that separate?
Yeah, there's light duty trucks that are lumped in with the passenger vehicles, and then there's more of the heavy duty, and that is under the Advanced Clean Trucks.
Okay.
And those have slightly different requirements, but it's the same premise that the Advanced Clean Trucks is a requirement on manufacturers to get those placed into service, where the Advanced Clean Cars 2 is just to have them delivered here. And so it really is critical for us to continue our programs to get those on the roads.
Okay, curious.
As far as your line here, as far as on-road vehicles, those are vehicles that aren't zero emission vehicles?
That's just the overall inventory of vehicles and what they contribute to greenhouse gases.
Okay, so the reason why it would go down is because you would have more, like 2050. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But the accuracy of your baseline is kind of important.
It's very important, yeah.
Right.
And we have projections. Our consultant worked closely with A&R and the consultant that did the work for the pathways analysis for the climate action plan. So really understanding what went into that and the projections that we needed for electrification, and that baseline is based on those projections. And so they aligned to the extent possible. There was some different methodologies and different calculations that they used, but they're really close in their modeling. So then we moved into the evaluation of the capital program. We were looking at agency generated emissions, so construction and maintenance, and operation of assets like transit. We have certain tools from the Federal Highway Administration and some reporting that we do through transit that data is used for that. Then we're looking at what we call changes in system user emissions. And this is associated with projects that shift mode from vehicles to bike or ped, transit service, and those types of operations. We're also looking at projects that promote or result in operational efficiency. So like roundabouts, adding certain lanes, signal retiming to keep traffic flowing more so there's less idling. And then clean technology, including electric vehicles, alternative fuel vehicles, and the infrastructure to go along with those. And so really, what can be drawn from our analysis of the capital program is that current program projects really have a small impact, reducing total transportation emissions by about 0.1%. So for 2025, we're looking at that 2,600, give or take, metric tons reduction. And if you remember from the last slide, the overall forecasted in 25 was 2.7 million metric tons. So our programs do not have a great capacity to reduce carbon emissions.
The report said the 2030 requirement would be met in approximately 2035.
Mm-hmm. If we just continue on the path that we're on.
Yeah, assuming continued investment right here.
Good job.
I don't have much of a life, do I?
The other takeaway from this is really that as we electrify, the DMT reductions from mode shift really have less of an impact because you're not taking away those carbon emissions from an internal combustion engine.
Can you explain why transit is so low? Is that just transit? We're talking about public transit, right? Buses, trains. I'm surprised that it's so low. These are projections. It's projected to get worse or less effective over time. Why would that be?
I think that is.
It's all the fruit's been plucked from the tree.
We're not going to keep doing.
Maybe. I don't know.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to contribute.
Michelle Boonhauer, Agency of Transportation. I think what I would draw from this is that, once we have a sort of a limited fleet of transit vehicles, and ridership is probably not going to grow that much. So once we electrify the fleet of transit vehicles, we're done, with that more or less. Similarly, park and rides, we're only going to populate so many park and rides that people are going to use. So that's why you're seeing these sort of declining benefits that would accrue.
Because this is on baseline, not on what we could save if we changed our
Exactly.
transit.
Yeah, this is a valuation of what we've got going on now and staying that way. Yeah. Thanks, Michelle.
So the reductions are relative to the, I just want to go back to the prior chart. I'm not sure so on the AOT capital program, and we've got obviously declining. Is the 2050 relative to the baseline or relative to the 2030 or what's the what,
Just making sure we're looking.
I'm not
at the same
sure
thing.
what, traffic operations, what is the, I assume, we would reduce 564 metric tons.
Yeah, this is
there,
just looking at
Is
our.
it just within that year, or?
So it's
relative to the
looking at our-
baseline?
It's looking at the projects that we have planned right now
Uh-huh.
and what they can do. And if we just do the status quo with these types of projects, these are the emissions reductions that we would expect in those out years. And so as we go into it, clearly showing that we're not making a huge impact with these as is, we're looking at how we can use the carbon reduction program dollars to make the greatest impact possible with those dollars.
Because they're additional, so like in transit, the 4 that you save in 2050 is additional to the 23 per year that you're doing in 2030. Like those are ongoing.
Yes, yes, and they're just not, that's the vehicle miles
So the
traveled.
projects in 2025 would be 560 generated metric tons. 2030 would be 425, so it's additive, and then 68 with declining impacts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway from this is to recognize that we have some potential to make some impact. It's not going to be a very huge impact.
I think one thing I would add is where you have states that do a lot of capacity projects, so they're adding interstate lanes, they're adding new roadways, interchanges, et cetera. They have a lot of room for reducing carbon emissions from the capacity projects, which would be driving additional vehicle miles traveled in those areas. So if you were Texas.
And assuming those vehicle miles travels are in EVs?
Well, at this
If they're
point,
just conventional,
Yeah, when we
they
talked
would be
to-
adding to the.
right.
When we first presented this to Federal Highway, they were surprised that we were seeing any reduction at all. Because there are a lot of states that are going up because they
I mean,
are.
there are a lot of states that have even abandoned
Yeah.
even trying to do. I mean, New
Yeah.
Hampshire's not doing anything, Massachusetts is scaling back, New York's scaling back. And I mean, we've got to be in the New England states and then the surrounding states surrounding New England, we've got to be the leader in what we're trying to accomplish.
It varies. I think, New York is working hard to launch their cap and invest program and making a lot of climate investments. So I would say that they are probably ahead of us. Connecticut did abandon some of their efforts related to GHG emission projects. So, and it's also cyclical based on political winds.
Right. There's no question.
I would also think it would, some states are actually very significant growing populations.
Yes.
And that would influence the number of
Absolutely.
drivers. We're
But
not,
if you get to a state like New York or any other state other than Vermont, Rhode Island excluded probably, I mean, they should be doing more, right? I mean, their population and all of that and an amount of land mass that they
all
have
this is proportional.
compared to population,
Well,
So when we looked at the overall, the forecasted emissions and then the minor impact of our capital program, we clearly have a gap. So comparing the projected with the required emission levels, we're on target to meet the 2025 emission requirements, but we're looking at a fairly significant gap in 2030 as well as in 2050.
what is your assessment in terms of, this is, so much of what you hear, for example, with the availability of EVs, are our goals ahead of the technology? I guess is my question.
Right now, I can't tell you exactly.
Are our aspirations ahead of the tech? I mean, like Ford was going to reduce the production of its Lightning trucks. One would think in this environment, they would be, that seems to be counter to
and I think
that.
where it's gotten to them is Ford is reading the other day that $68,000 per vehicle is what it's costing them to sell an electric vehicle, 68. So I mean, it's unsustainable for them as a company to absorb it with other traditional sales. And so that's,
So you're talking about cross,
I mean, they're responsible for stockholders and they've got to, I mean, it does get down to a business model that they can afford to sustain.
Your 37 Chevy, Gene, you're gonna have to upgrade here.
I have a 31 Chevy
31.
and a 23 Model T and a 73 Mercury Capri. And my Honda, which is hopefully will pass inspection one more time, because environmentally, that's the right thing to do. I'm not buying a new car any sooner than I need
Your
to.
sister might help you out a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, she got a lot of them there. They got a lot of dealers working on it.
She has a chauffeur.
Yeah, I've been riding with Scott Beck, so I like to carpool. I've
There you
carpooled
go.
since 1973 or vanpool. And I can't understand why people in Massachusetts will go into that labor market, one person in a car and sit there in traffic for as long as it takes. It's like, at some point, don't build any more lanes, make it so uncomfortable and so lengthy, people will be forced to change their behavior. And they only do it when they really are compelled to do it.
But as long as it's
Generally.
convenient, though, they gotta at the same time get out of work and go to work.
Well, convenient, but I don't know. That's an argument that I have to have my own vehicle. I don't know, I can.
Did you use the state van pool system?
We would've-
Incentive?
Well, this was back during the oil embargo
Right.
go with Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
So I think
Did
it,
you van pool with you?
no,
Yeah.
but it was, we were one of the first, that and AppGap. Two commuters were two of the very first.
Because that program still runs, right? The van.
Yeah. It's probably changed names and changed whatever over, how many years ago would that be? 50.
Or something.
Yeah.
So, and then we move into looking at available options to close a gap. So basically, expanding those projects and programs that VTrans oversees, like the bike ped, transit, EV incentives, our charging infrastructure programs. Looking at
Who came up with this agreement? Was this the consultants or a combination of the consultants and your public engagement?
it's the consultants coming up with what they know could work, and then going out to the public and getting some stakeholder input on that. And I have a slide on that next. Looking at supporting incentives that encourage compact land use and teletravel, and then looking at what other policies, incentives, and regulations that could be implemented again to meet those requirements.
Is this, Rochelle, you wanting me to introduce my fee-based bill again? Is that
No.
I see fee-based on there.
That is one of these
Potential strategies.
strategies the consultant said could be considered. It's not an endorsement of.
So, why specific?
So, like you just mentioned, yes, we went back out to the stakeholders and to the public with these strategies to solicit feedback. You can see there's quite a bit of support for mode shift coming from the environmental, regional transit, EJ groups, and also the public really supporting bike ped and transit, as well as land use strategies that work in tandem with that to promote the mode shift. There was mixed input on the transition to alternative fueling, so electrification. And that's not necessarily that they didn't want to see it. They just didn't want it to outweigh other strategies. This was particularly important, and the EJ group and the public were just worried that we were going to kind of forget about everything else and just say electrification is the only thing we have to do. If we do that, we'll be fine. So it's not.
So the freight rail people wanted us to do more freight rail. Is that what I'm reading? As far like just reading the chart. I'm not picking on that group, but
We might think about, we even have the number of tractor trailer trucks that takes off the road each car.
yeah, no, but they don't want it. They're not looking at changing the fuel that the locomotives would run. That's what the Brown and that
Yeah.
column would
Yeah, they had mixed results on that. The elected officials also supported mode shift.
be. Well, that's elected. That's what electeds.
Elected, yeah.
And
We,
what's the final column?
We've got, right, we can't
Cover
see.
that.
Oh, it
Oh,
must be on our slide.
oh, sorry, it's the public.
They like everything.
I like everything.
They did, which is, where we landed. So, definitely, business and freight, the rail groups, they just had concerns around clean truck and carbon management strategies. They definitely had, input, on regulations. They would prefer to see incentives rather than regulations. So if we're gonna make any sweeping changes to try to make that more incentive-based than regulatory.
All carrots and no sticks. And what is carbon management?
Carbon management is those things like a clean transportation standard, policies, a cap and invest, those types of things. There was definitely noted concern from the EJ groups on that, just to note out the consumer impacts on that. So taking what we heard from that first round of outreach, we put some assumptions together, and then we modeled the impact of these additional strategies. For those strategies whose effects were quantified, we modeled that the 2030 gap could be closed by about 18%, and you can see in that combined effect, we're looking at different scenarios. Part of the consultant's work was to look at different scenarios and putting those together and see what they would do. But with sort of an all-in approach, we're looking at about an 18% reduction with an estimated cost of about $400 million in 2030. So
Big
one,
part of that's broadband. Is that right?
yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just pointing out that these.
Is that over and above what we already have in the pipeline?
Yes, it is. These are
So
additional,
these are percentages of the gap, not of the total.
right. So, and then the evaluation looking at 2050, really pointing to the effectiveness of electrification, both for transit and medium heavy duty fleets. But just recognizing that that's going to take some time.
But is the strategy, if this is the strategy, you're saying we're gonna get, is this the combined effects of 17? Even if you were to add these up, you're still way short of your closing the gap.
Yeah, that was the close to 18% would be accumulative of all the
Of
things
everything. And
for 2030.
and is that the strategy? Like, okay, we can only get 18%?
Yes, unless we do other things.
Okay.
But-
And is that the plan? Like, that's what you submitted to the vendor, like, we're gonna get to 18%? Because they don't really care about the state goal, I guess.
So, I think the point that came up earlier was that by 2035, we would reach, the target we are seeking without having to do some of these additional activities. And so that was stated in there. And so we, basically submitted this plan as is to Federal Highway, indicating this is how far we can get with the tools we have. And we also, and Andrea may be about to talk about this, but, have discussed with the Climate Council the fact that some of the deep analysis and like multitude of inquiry that would need to occur to better understand how fee-based and like a cap and invest program, et cetera, would impact across sort of the economics and sphere of the state, that's gonna, and joining such a program such as the New York cap and invest program, what the questions need to be that we need to ask and what those ramifications or benefits will be was well beyond the scope of what we can do with this program and also beyond what the feds were asking us to do. So there is room for more analysis that needs to occur that people I think hoped would occur in this project. And the EPA funding that is going to be coming to the Agency of Natural Resources will be a source of funding that can help explore those questions in further detail.
Can you remind me, is New York, what are they capping? carbon or just fossil fuel use?
All fuels.
Solid fuels.
Just like based on gallons or based on metric tons of CO2?
It's a carbon intensity. I'm not sure exactly which metrics they're going for. I really don't know.
In all of these strategies and estimations and, are we using today's technology? Is there anything built into that the technologies will get more efficient or anything better, or is it, we're just basing out what we know now? Is that's what, if nothing changed this way that we're doing it now, this is where we're getting to.
Yeah, because I don't think we have like enough information about the benefits that could come, like aviation electrification is a great
Right.
example. We don't have enough baseline on that yet to understand how that will impact the system.
So I guess probably the numbers that we're seeing here could get better as technologies improve, and they're going to. I mean, they do with everything, that's life, so it's not, it's just because we don't reach a goal of where we are at. I mean, it could be that we are gonna reach that goal if everything keeps improving.
Yeah, and even as is, like Michelle just mentioned, Senator Kitchen mentioned earlier that the 2030 goal could be met. We modeled, there's a lot of different assumptions and different things that go into a modeling, but could be met by 2035. This is a slide to just sort of explain what was not modeled and why, the Clean Transportation Standard and the Cap and Invest. There's a lot of details that go into the design of that type of program. And so we did a little bit of modeling, but we chose not to include it because we didn't want to put information out there that was misleading. And you just really can't know until you design the intricacies of a program like that. I am going to fly through a lot of this. This is really the public survey. I really want to get to the resilience improvement plan, and I assume you want to have lunch at a decent hour. So,
Because I have a meeting in 5 minutes.
so we do.
I had a question on the next slide, I think. Can you just explain what the mobility column is talking about?
So just not being in single occupancy vehicle trips.
That's basically not state of our.
Right, single occupancy vehicle. Yeah.
So V lane, HOV.
So when we're considering what we're going to do with the dollars, we're really we're looking at what can provide the greenhouse gas emissions reductions, but also looking at these co-benefits because that's really where we're going to see the gains in these programs. There's really a lot of overlap for equity and health and different things that we can get with the programs that will also achieve the greenhouse gas emissions reductions. This goes into what the strategy looks like. Are we going to lose other people in 5 minutes, or will we have the opportunity to go through the?
We can always come back
Yeah.
and finish.
Kind of interesting stuff. I'd hate to just rush through it.
Okay, well
Let's plan another time.
Well, I think I can wrap this up in the next few minutes, but and I can come back for the resilience improvement plan certainly. So basically, these are the strategy categories. The carbon reduction strategy goes into a great amount of detail on each of these. We're looking at, we heard from the stakeholders, and we knew that it was going to take some combination of all these things. We have 4 main sets of strategies that we looked further into and made recommendations to how to expand those for the greatest benefit for greenhouse gas emissions. And then we also realized that we need to center equity. So we had 2 focus areas too, centering equity and making sure that we continue to measure our progress working with our partners from ANR in the Climate Action Office. And so these really next slides are those program areas broken down. Basically, in the carbon reduction strategy, you'll see them broken out in this way. What current activities are occurring, what our additional opportunities are, and then considerations of what we heard from the stakeholder and public input, so that when we move forward with these additional opportunities, we're considering what concerns were out there. So we have that with the capital program.
in TDM, that's like the main program. Is there, what other program is under TDM? Or is that just it?
There's a lot.
Okay.
You know,
But
it's-
microtransit is considered transit, or is that TDM?
well, that's kind of in between. That's different mobility options.
It's only 800.
There's the Go Vermont program, there's the Van Pool program, there's there's a whole litany of things we do under TDM, yeah.
So the next few slides that you see really are just a breakdown of those other categories. So the transportation programs, the land use and teletravel, and sort of what's going on now, what more we could be doing, and then considerations from the public and the stakeholders again. Same with zero emission vehicles. And then the same for these additional strategies. So looking at the advanced clean fleets, or the clean transportation standard, or cap and invest, what we could do.
What's sales tax reallocation?
Is that in the land use?
Yeah, that's right.
No, I'm sure the ed fund would like that.
I would ask
It's going.
ACCD more about that. They were on one of our, they were in our technical committee and an advisory committee. And so I actually don't know what sales tax reallocations
I assume
are.
they just mean stealing some of the sales tax from education fund.
That says current activity.
That's current activities for what they're doing now. So I can't speak to what programs that's happening.
Oh, maybe it's
but-
the use, I mean, the purchase and use going to the education fund, you could not.
That's not sales tax,
That's
that's
not sales.
purchase
Sort of.
Well, sort of, but we count it separately
Yeah.
and,
I think-
estimate it.
It may be the portion of sales tax that currently goes to specific communities that they can use that for
Oh, okay.
transportation purposes.
Oh,
Or
oh.
reduction purposes.
Oh, you're talking about local option tax.
Local option tax, yeah, not sales, I mean,
Which
Oh, that is a
sales
sales tax, yeah,
yeah.
on the local level.
Okay, sorry to.
That's okay. There's a lot of different things that
We
go
will
into
stray.
this, so,
So I do have to run.
okay.
Is this a good place? Break? and
Yeah,
then we'll
there's
run
not
back?
too much more on here, I don't think, but.
You don't want to miss any of it?
We can break.
Well,
No, I don't want to miss any of it, so we'll be a good break.
Okay, we'll save it for.
Yeah.
Maybe
you
Friday.
may give me the whole load of pay. Okay, all right. Sorry, we might be done.
Oh, Jane, you got some new ones this year. I like that.
What?
The whole load of hay, yeah.
Sit the veil I need.
And we'll stop sharing.
And then the resilient improvement plan that you were gonna do, maybe when you come back.
I'm sorry? Yes, I can definitely.
Yes.
want me to stop
Sure,
the last?
yeah.